It is you that have been favored to be the Star-Bearer's champion in this time of desperation. Your journey will be a perilous one.
Kiss Psycho Circus is a first-person shooting game developed by a team called Third Law Interactive. It was released for the Sega Dreamcast and Microsoft Windows in 2000. It runs on the Lithtech engine previously used in such games as Blood 2 and No One Lives Forever. I'm not the biggest Kiss fan, but having said that, I do know the game is based off the comic book series of the same name, and it obviously features the band members as protagonists. As far as I could gather from the cutscenes, you play as one of the members of the band, who've all somehow picked up superpowers and magical weapons. You travel across 4 different dimensions to the Psycho Circus to kill one of the 4 demon lords.
In the garage, you should find transportation to the circus.
All this really means in gaming terms is that the game has 4 chapters and 4 bosses, as well as a 5th final boss. Each chapter of the game focuses on a particular member of the band and their journey. As you progress through the levels, you acquire new pieces of armor one by one until, fully suited up, you take on the end chapter boss. Chapters range from 1 to 2 hours each, so all in all, it's a pretty lengthy game. Each band member has a signature weapon, as well as a standard lineup of other weapons which carry across each character. Aside from the standard weapons, you can also collect various power-ups throughout the environments. The most unique of these is a jack-in-the-box item which can be thrown like a timed grenade. The gameplay is a mix of exploration and basic puzzle solving, combined with endless waves of bad guys, most often coming at the player from these things called spawners. Now, I'm all for killing waves and waves of enemies. Games like Painkiller and Serious Sam are full of that kind of gameplay, and they do it really well. But Kiss Psycho Circus, on the other hand, really does not. There's a fine line with these types of shooters between making the game challenging and just making it cheap. Psycho Circus skates a thin line between the two, but definitely leans in regard to the latter. The levels themselves are generally very well designed, but the underlying problem is that the environments usually don't lend themselves to that style of gameplay. Killing dozens of enemies at any one time is easy, but not when you're barely given the space to maneuver. Levels are often small rooms, corridors, and hallways with very little room to dodge and weave. The most common enemy in the game are these little headless spider-looking things that come at you by the dozen, and though they're easy to kill, when you've got a shitload of these little pricks taking up an entire room, it becomes near impossible to even move, let alone dodge projectiles. And these projectiles do a shit ton of damage to the point where it feels really unbalanced. Even from the smaller and weaker enemies, you can only take 3 or 4 hits before buying the farm. I mean, it's a hard game, but for all the wrong reasons. As a result, I often find myself cheaping my way through levels, peeking around corners, taking pot shots at enemies before hiding so they can't hit me. I mean, when you have to resort to finishing a game by playing like that, you know something's not right. It doesn't help that half the time they barely give you enough ammo to get by. It's so bad that in some of the levels I'm reduced to using nothing but the weakest weapons, which are slow, underpowered, and borderline useless. Each weapon uses an elemental ammo type, which is supposed to be useful against different types of enemies. But this idea goes out the fucking window because 9 times out of 10 you don't have the right ammo to deal with them properly, if any ammo at all. I just find myself running past them most of the time, but that can only work so far. This is a serious problem that affects the game in a very fundamental way, and it just blows me away that it was left like this. Was the lead level designer just asleep at his desk or something and didn't realise? This horde style of shooting game has been done a dozen times before and also been done much better. Kiss Psycho Circus never really stops being anything other than mediocre, and those few times when the game does become enjoyable are sadly something of a rarity. It does have a really cool atmosphere though, and I really dig the whole nightmarish carnival thing with all the freak show themed enemies. You can also tell a lot of effort went into the story and the art style overall, but it just doesn't hold a candle to other shooters of its kind. If you like playing games that let you kill entire swarms of brain-dead enemies, then Serious Sam and the Painkiller series are a much safer bet. For something more recent, the Shadow Warrior reboot is also going to scratch that itch. Kiss Psycho Circus didn't really get much of a reaction when it was first released, and there's a reason for that. I think the game is technically vaporware at the moment, so if you do want to check it out, at least it's not going to cost you anything. God may have gave rock and roll to us, but he sure as hell didn't give us this game.